Martin, thank you so much for joining the podcast, man.
No worries, Ryan. Thanks for inviting me on.
So I want to start by sharing two facts that may not be that surprising to some people about sleep, according to the sleepfoundation.org. And just get your opinion on this. 35.2% of all adults in the U.S. report sleeping on average for less than 7 hours per night. And fact number two, almost half of all Americans say they feel sleepy during the day between 3 and 7 days a week. So Martin, why is sleep so important, and what happens to us when we don't get enough sleep?
Thank you. Look, I guess those two facts are not surprising to me, to be honest with you. If you've got 35% of people that are not getting the minimum amount required, which is 7 to 9 hours, really depending on your lifestyle, and we can touch into that a little bit in a moment. But yeah, like if people are feeling sleepy throughout the day, then they're not getting either the correct amount of sleep or the quality of their sleep they're getting is poor. And to touch on what happens when we don't get enough sleep is really sleep controls every single physiological component in our body, and it's mainly the sole purpose is to recover and rejuvenate, and also to allow us to process our emotional thoughts. So chronically, if we get poor sleep, then we get chronic disease, we get high levels of stress, we get anxiety, depression, mental health issues. And your podcast is about performance. There are massive performance decrements. We lose our cognitive function, our ability to recall memories. And in the long term, there's things like Alzheimer's, cardiac issues, and diabetes. They're all associated with having poor sleep.
Yeah, it's so important. It's so often neglected. How do you actually get into becoming like a sleep scientist and really interested in this field?
So I originally did an exercise physiology degree, and my major when I did a master's was in respiratory physiology. And then I went into clinical work, and in medicine, respiratory and sleep tie in together because of sleep disordered breathing conditions such as obstructive sleep apnea. It's one of the most common problems in the world at the moment in terms of poor sleep. And because they linked together, I essentially trained as a clinical scientist with the National School of Healthcare Scientists over in the UK as a respiratory and sleep scientist. And for the last 9 years, I've been working with people with both breathing issues, sleep issues, and more recently with performance through health. It's tying in also the stress and anxiety because they all are linked together, whether we're breathing inappropriately to cause stress and then the stress causes issues with sleep. I see that as the foundation of health and performance essentially is ensuring that we have regulation of our own physiology, our own body, our own biology to have the correct habits and behaviors to get the solid foundation of sleep.
Yeah, it's crazy because you never really think, and maybe some people do, but the relationship between breathing and sleep. And I know that you're over there in the UK, and then I know you trained you're in Australia and you trained in the UK, and I know some people that are in America might not have picked up on the term respiratory when you had said it. But so, you're focusing on breathing, you're focusing on sleeping, and you're right, like sleep apnea, it's such a common disorder to have, as well as, just snoring, right? So why do people snore and have sleep apnea? Are they doing something wrong? And then can that be caused by stress? Is it specifically caused by the way they're breathing, something physiological with them? And then what are those effects that it could have on the sleep?
So to answer your first question is that obviously the world at large in the West is getting more and more overweight and obese, and that is causing issues related to having large necks and hormonal imbalances in the body that are leading to obstructive sleep apnea. So obstructive sleep apnea is where your airways essentially collapse during your sleep, and it might look like you're choking. This can happen 30, 40, up to 100 times an hour. And every time this happens, your body gets a jolt of adrenaline to try and wake you up and get you to breathe properly. And that's basically wakes the mind up And that just leads to this poor quality of sleep. So people wake up feeling tired and fatigued, or no, they get halfway through the day and they're just not enough to sleep. So if you've got snoring, which is just the vibration of the airways as the air passes through, and you're an individual who suffers with excessive daytime sleepiness, meaning that you're snoozing the alarm all the time and you're struggling to focus during the day and you just want to go and take naps, then there's a high chance that you do have obstructive sleep apnea. Now, to touch on the question that you said about, is there anything to do with stress? Well, I put a solid hypothesis together, looking at environmental factors and how diet and stress itself can play a role in how we breathe. And that's looking at certain hormones within the body. There's a body we call leptin, which is a hormone that when we eat, it makes us feel full. It satiates us. But it's also a hormone that drives breathing at nighttime.
Really?
Yeah. So just like with diabetes, you get insulin resistance, we also now know that you get leptin resistance. So if people are then becoming excessively stressed and they get high levels of cortisol, cortisol actually lowers the levels of leptin in the body. So the drive to breathe at nighttime is reduced. Now, what sleep apnea is really, it's what we call hypoventilation. It's under breathing. And when we under breathe, the airway just slowly narrows and narrows and narrows to the point where it occludes. And then that's when you get that choking with your breathing and all of a sudden a gasp. So there's more than just the typical overweight individual to it. I've seen more and more non-obese individuals getting this, and especially the people that you're targeting, the high performance individuals who might wear a badge on their chest saying, hey, look, I can sleep 5 hours and I can work 20 hours a day, 19, 20 hours a day and go hard at it. In the long term, that's going to lead to some kind of issues such as sleep apnea.
Yeah. So that's interesting because you said under breathing, right? So the under breathing then causes you just not getting enough. So are you talking about just the sheer volume of air that you're bringing in?
Yeah. So it's essentially, if you haven't got the drive to breathe at nighttime, because there's some kind of change in your sensitivity within your airways that's driving you to breathe, then your breathing is going to be a lot shallower. So there's two things there. If the breathing is shallower, the airway is more likely to relax because there's less pressure in the airway. But also over time, the muscles that you use to breathe in the airway are also going to weaken as well because you're not breathing as much in the long term because you're under breathing. Now, a lot of people, when they're stressed or feeling anxious in the day, they hyperventilate, they overbreathe. So I think there's some kind of mechanism or an opposite reaction at nighttime that then also leads them to underbreathe, perhaps maybe something to do with the central nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, to get that balance of the breathing correct throughout the 24-hour period.
Yeah, so this is a little counterintuitive to me, and let's unpack this because I'm curious about it. So if you're under breathing at night, and because of this maybe desire to not take deep breaths while you're sleeping, which is causing your airway to kind of shut down and relax those muscles, I would think that working out like during the day and having like a rigorous exercise routine would then strengthen those breathing muscles, or at least the desire to like gasp for air from a workout would be a good thing for sleeping. But what you said too was that stress where maybe you're over breathing because of the cortisol might actually be messing with the breathing at night, even though it's still like an quote over breathing. I mean, am I thinking of this wrong, or is this something that you've looked at, or?
No, so if you think about during the day, if you've got someone who is anxious and they have, let's say, what the gas that we respond to breathe is carbon dioxide. It's not low levels of oxygen. It's high levels of carbon dioxide. However, when we are anxious or when we are in chronic stress, people are often breathing them through their mouth and they'll hyperventilate. So they won't even notice it. Throughout the day, it'll just be. But it should be very slow, gentle breathing through the nose. Now, what it does is it offloads a lot of this carbon dioxide throughout the day. So people have like a generally lower level of that throughout their system, and they become sensitive to those changes. So then when they exercise or when they become a little bit stressed, then all of a sudden they start to breathe more. So they become more sensitive to breathing throughout the day. So they're breathing more throughout the day. and they might breathe more during exercise. And that also shifts the mechanics in their breathing. They might breathe from the upper chest rather than from the abdomen. They might breathe through the mouth rather than the nose. And this is altering how they breathe at nighttime. And the literature suggests that when we have upper chest breathing and when we have mouth breathing and when people are sensitive to carbon dioxide, then there's a highly likely chance that they're going to get obstructive sleep apnea, most likely due to changes in their breathing pattern at night.
That's really interesting. So what else affects your ability to sleep? And let me even back up. So there's 3 stages of sleep, right? And correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. There's the light sleep, the deep sleep, and the REM sleep. So does it matter if any of these different phases are affected, or are they affected differently if you're having sleep apnea or you're having issues or you're not getting enough of one or the other?
Yeah, 100%. So there's 2 phases. There's non-REM sleep and there's REM sleep.
Okay.
And then within non-REM, there's light, there's stage 2, and there's stage 3, which is deep sleep. So yeah, you just missed the middle one out.
Okay.
And each one of these sections has a different responsibility for what's going on in the body. Okay, so during REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement, is typically when we're dreaming. Our body is paralyzed, so we don't act out our dreams. So if the body's paralyzed, then the muscles are relaxed. So that's when you're more likely to have these episodes of the airway collapsing because your body's paralyzed. So what we typically see is people who have sleep apnea, they're more likely to have sleep apnea during REM sleep. So then what happens is they have less REM sleep because they get disturbed in that, or the quality of that REM sleep is poor. Now, REM sleep is to do with essentially our emotional regulation. So the first thing that's noticeable when people who have sleep apnea, and that might even be a mild form, is they start to feel more irritable. Their emotions are a bit high. They might feel like they're just, when you've had a few bad nights sleeping, you just like someone says something, you just react differently. We know that within our brain, obviously we've got the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. The amygdala is like our primitive part of the brain. The activity of that part of the brain in people who have a lack of REM sleep or who have obstructive sleep apnea is heightened. So they're more reactive than they are responsive. So for performance, if you want to make it a choice versus a reaction, if you've got a business meeting or you have to try and take a breath to slow down, then you don't want to be in that state. So not having something treated like sleep apnea or not getting a quality REM sleep is not going to be desirable for anyone in that situation.
That's a really interesting point because you're right. And you had mentioned it earlier when you said there's a lot of people that will say, hey, I can burn the candle at both ends. I need 4 hours of sleep, 5 hours of sleep, whatever it is. I can work 20 hours a day, sleep 4 hours, and I can be uber productive. Well, when you're doing that, you are sacrificing something, right? And maybe it is that REM sleep. And that's generally going to be like a high-performing business individual that has a lot on their plate that says, yeah, I don't need that much sleep because I got a lot to take care of. There's people relying on me. There's a business relying on me. There's a lot of monetary incentive to get as much done as possible and to return on your time investment. And it's a waste when you're sleeping. So yeah, how truly does that REM affect the emotional state? I mean, it's really cool to think about, like, is it the dreams themselves? Is it something going on physiologically that's affecting the emotions?
There's 2 angles you could really take. Is dreams are a form of therapy to, in essence, like there's a lot we don't know about dreams, but the scientific literature suggests that when we do dream, we're just taking in all the information from the day and we're putting it into our memory so we don't have to worry about it in the future. So if something small but insignificant happens, say for example you're walking down the road and all of a sudden the car beeps and you jump at it, you might replay that period in your mind. It comes out of a dream that's completely different, but it's cemented into your brain to say, hey, look, you don't need to worry about that car anymore. Again, as more traumatic things happen, it gets, it's not just sleep that's able to process that. There's a lot more that goes beyond that. However, the other side of the thing is actually the connection between the prefrontal cortex and this amygdala. So say the prefrontal cortex is your CEO and it's the one that's giving the directions and the orders. The amygdala is just holding at the back, just is our instincts. The CEO can override the instincts by what we have is top-down control. However,
Okay.
the link between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala when we have a lack of sleep is severed. So we have less neurons firing between that. So the connections themselves are lessened, and therefore the amygdala starts to take over more, and that's why we get more like emotional as well.
Man, so go ahead.
I guess the third aspect is just the general feeling of tiredness. Like the way you feel dictates how you perceive the world. If you feel tired, the world becomes more of a burden.
Yeah. So what can people do to get better sleep?
So look, I would always say to begin with is in trying to stick to a schedule as much as possible. Is trying to get to bed at the same time and get up at the same time each day. Like that's just about a given. Like our body's on a clock that's run by the sun. When the sun comes up, we should be starting feeling more alert, and when the sun goes down, we should start feeling more tired. And it's a hormonal response that's been evolved over millions of years. And just because we have a light switch on, all of a sudden we can change that, and it causes it can cause a huge issues for us. So typically, looking at that and then looking at trying to get your 7 to 9 hours. Now, if you're a highly stressed individual who works out with high intensity, works out 4 times a week, and then you've got to run in a business, you're doing a podcast, and you've got your partner and family to look after, your stress levels might be higher than the typical person. So you actually might need more sleep. You might need to push yourself to that 8.5 and 9 hours. That said, those individuals are not going to want to hear that information. So
Not at all.
What can you do? Well, if you're not getting that sleep, then you can still use stress management practices or relaxation practices throughout the day. That might be 5 or 10 minutes of breath work of just slow breathing, 3 seconds in through the nose, 6 seconds out, just when you go to the toilet and sat on the loo, or when you're washing your hands, just accumulative over the day. Or you might do something called a non-sleep deep rest protocol, which is based off yoga nidra, which is basically a form of relaxation, and it allows us to get into the parasympathetic nervous state and relax our nervous system, which is yoga nidra is yoga sleep essentially, and it's basically like getting a 90-minute cycle in 15-20 minutes.
Tell me more about that, because I know, napping obviously is, and I know if you were to talk to any high-level executive, I would imagine, and I'm kind of putting words and thoughts into their minds here, but I would imagine you're not going to hear a CEO talk about taking a nap, right? But if you're talking about a 15-minute reset that's actually going to benefit your stress, your emotional well-being, your physical well-being, I mean, that seems really powerful. So what is that yoga sleep nap therapy that you're talking about there?
I guess it might be easier if I just tell you a bit about a story of like how effective this is. Really, is like I do an 8-week stress and anxiety relief program, and during that program, around about 3 or 4 weeks in, I start to get people to implement these, what we call non-sleep deep rest protocols into their life. And it's basically just putting earplugs into their ears for 10 minutes. And it's just a guided meditation that might take people through a few breaths. And it circles their focus around different parts around their body. So it might start with the thumb, the fingers, and then work all the way up the body and all the way down again. And it's making you go internal, but you can't move your body. So you've got to stay completely still. And it's scientifically been proven was one of the best forms of getting our nervous system to just go into this real deep sleep state without actually having to go to sleep. And it's a good reset. Now, have you ever heard of a measure called heart rate variability?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, so heart rate variability, it's on all these Oura rings and all these fancy devices that people use to track their health nowadays. And heart rate variability gives us a good indication of how well you can actually get into the parasympathetic nervous state, which is our relaxation state. And what I notice is during my program, when I start to get people to do these non-sleep deep rest, NSDR protocols, is that their heart rate variability increases significantly and their perceived stress levels come down by 30-40%. And it's massively beneficial because it is literally go on YouTube, type in NSDR 10 minutes, plug it in, and it's almost as good as better than getting a nap because it's so time effective.
Yeah, that's crazy because 10 minutes to reboot some of those systems and to actually return that much is unbelievable. And it's crazy too, because it's consistent with a lot of things in life that high performers like to do is it's self-aware, right? Like you're realizing at some point that you are becoming stressed. You are having not an emotional breakdown, but a breakdown in maybe your ability to function emotionally, physically at the level that you would hope to function at. And it's a really great kind of performance hack to bring awareness to your body and be able to like calm it down. How much does nutrition affect sleep?
Nutrition, obviously, if you're under eating and you're not getting enough energy intake, then you're putting your body into a state of high stress. So the stress is going to cause issues related to sleep. However, there is some evidence to suggest that certain nutrients and nutrient timing can actually help with sleep. So carbohydrates are full of a chemical called tryptophan, which is a precursor to serotonin, which then actually leads on to the production of melatonin, which is what helps us make sleep. So have you ever noticed that when you have you might have a big bowl of warm oats or something, and all of a sudden afterwards you might feel a little bit tired and you're a little bit kind of like, oh, I feel like I have a little bit of a nap, having a nap. Well, that's because you get, number one, you got a belly full of food, so it puts you into that digest state, into that relaxation state. But number two, you're getting higher levels of tryptophan going out in your body, so you can start to produce more serotonin and melatonin, which makes us feel more relaxed. So I typically tell people, if they're struggling to sleep at night time and they feel like they're under eating or they've had a hard session late at night, then to try and put a big bolus of carbohydrates before they go to bed, and that should help make them feel sleepy.
Yeah, I've actually heard that from a couple different people as well. And I interviewed this trainer a couple weeks back, and he was talking about not having any carbohydrates, at least in like a large form of a meal, until dinner. And he was like, because yeah, there's an effect on your body that you have when you have carbohydrates. It just makes you tired. And he's like, so why would you have a bunch of them in the morning when you're getting ready for your day? Why at all would you have them during lunch? Because everybody complains about this post-lunch brain fog, and it's just like your body having to digest this. It's a heavy meal, and now you're going to want to be sleepy. So he's like, but I'm not saying don't eat them, just eat them at dinner. Because what do you want to do after dinner? Go to sleep. And now you're preparing your body for that sleep mentality of like, okay, here we go. We're shutting ourselves down. You can use this for recovery. You can work towards getting sleepy. And it seemed like a great idea at the time. And now that you're saying, yeah, it makes sense. I love it. What other supplements could people use? Because I've heard a lot of folks talk about melatonin. I actually spoke with a guy who owned a CBD company, and he said CBN is a great sedative supplement. So are there supplements that can help people fall asleep if they're struggling with that?
Yeah, I mean, if it's related to high stress, then there's ashwagandha, which is a herb that is basically like a very simple tranquilizer. It can bring cortisol level down and kind of bring stress levels down. So that's something that is rather safe to use. Magnesium threonate is also a good source of trying to help with the nervous system and can help increase the level of stage 3 sleep, deep sleep, which is ideal for anyone wanting to recover and repair. And then, I mean, CBD, the literature on that obviously is very sparse because it's something that's fairly new at the moment. However,
Right.
some people say it makes them feel relaxed and other people don't, whether that's the placebo. However, if you're taking something and it's making you feel sleepy, then why would you stop it? When it comes to melatonin, it's reasonably safe to take melatonin. However, you've got to be getting a high quality melatonin, because I know over in America you can get it over the counter over there, and there's sometimes it's maybe 10% of what it says it is, and sometimes it's 40% of the concentration where you said it is. So you really want to make sure you're getting a decent quality brand. But you can use that to reset your sleep. Now, if your schedule is all over the place and you're going to sleep at midnight one night and then 10 the night before, or the night after you go into bed at 9 o'clock, or you're waking up at different times, to get yourself into that consistent routine, you can use melatonin to try and help time the hormones in your body, because it's the hormone that helps us go to sleep. Essentially, it's what entrains our sleep states. So typically taking that 45 minutes to an hour before you want to go to sleep, but being consistent with it, is going to help reset that circadian clock.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And it's crazy because I recently went on a great family vacation. It was like one in a lifetime vacation for my family, and we live in like the New York, the Eastern time zone, and we took our family to Hawaii, which it took 25 hours to get there, sleeping in on the floor in airports. It was an amazing trip. A 6-hour time difference as well, and I felt great the whole time I was there because I was traveling west, right? And I was able to still wake up at a normal time, not at a normal time, but I was able to kind of get that rest in so long as I went to sleep early enough. But when I came back east from that vacation, it just crushed me for days because I couldn't wake up at the time that I was used to waking up at. And I ended up wearing a Whoop strap, which is similar to like an Apple Watch or a Garmin that monitors your sleep, because I was really curious how that would affect my sleep cycles. And it was great while I was there, and obviously it was showing me that I wasn't getting REM, I wasn't getting deep sleep when I got back, and obviously my sleep was cut short because I still had to get up for work. So the question that I have for you is, how can we use wearable technology like a Whoop strap, like an Apple Watch, to improve not only our sleep, but just our general performance and well-being?
So, I mean, these apps are great for tracking the data in the long term. So looking at it and just going, hey, last night I hit this percentage of deep sleep or whatever, is probably not going to be the most valuable of information. However, if you're looking at your data over a period of 6 months and then all of a sudden you're seeing a huge drop in your deep sleep or a drop in your REM sleep, then kind of noting each day or each week, reflecting on what it is going on in your life, or having a note of that somewhere, you can actually see what impacts your sleep. So whether you're changing your exercise schedule, or you're reducing the hours that you train in the gym, or you've gone on a particular diet, or you change something significant in your life, if that then changes the data on these Whoop bands and stuff like that, and it's looking like it's data that is obviously out of the ordinary, then you can go, okay, well, what is that that's actually changed my physiology? Now, I think going back to the heart rate variability, I think that's value that we're getting now on these these electronic devices is one of the most valuable information that we can use for our body. It's the best predictor about when we're going to burn out and when we're going to get sick. It's almost like if you see your heart rate variability drop by 20 to 25%, it means that within a week or two you're potentially going to be feeling crap, or you're going to be getting ill or sick, because it's such a good way to look at our strain and what's going on within our physiology.
Yeah, tell me more about that. So what specifically is like heart rate variability? How is it measured, and how can we, I guess, counteract it when we do see that?
So when we breathe in, what happens is obviously our chest cavity gets larger. The diaphragm contracts, that makes the volume in the lungs larger. So the heart just slightly drops a little bit. Now the heart becomes a little bigger. So the blood flow that goes through the heart slows down. So what that does, it sends a signal to the heart, to the sinoatrial node, the pacemaker in the heart, to say, the blood flow is slowing down, so we need to increase our heart rate. So we get an increase in heart rate all of a sudden. So we're getting sympathetic activity. It's actually a bit of a stressor to take a big breath in. So whenever you're shocked or something shocking happens to you, you go, that's because it causes this activation of stress response. Now, when we breathe out, the opposite happens. The rib cage all of a sudden goes a little bit smaller. The blood pressure going through the heart speeds up, so this heart rate slows down. So when we take on a breath cycle, we get this increase or decrease in our heart rate. That's what heart rate variability is. So it's looking at our nervous system. It's looking at our the balance of our sympathetic nervous system, which is our stressors. It's like kind of like the the Duracell bunny. It's the high alert side, and then we've got the tortoise on the other side, which is the calm and slow and relaxing sort of thing. Now, a rabbit might only live for 12 years, whereas a tortoise might live for 120 years. So you kind of want the balance between the two. The majority of what the heart rate variability is looking at your ability to flick from one state to the other. And your autonomic nervous system and how healthy your autonomic nervous system is. So the greater your heart rate variability, the more able you're able to get into that relaxed tortoise state and able to switch yourself into that state. Now, people with chronic stress get stuck in this kind of like rabbit side of things, this kind of high energy side of things. And that's when it leads to those issues related to anxiety, perception changes within our mind where we see the world differently, we get chronic disease. So what we can do to counteract that is what I just said, is like we can focus on prolonged exhale breathing. So if we actually take control of our nervous system, and like the yogics say, we might do 3 seconds in and 6 seconds out of very gentle breathing, 5 or 10 minutes a day. Add that in with 10 minutes of these deep rest protocols, and all of a sudden we're going to see some rises in our heart rate variability because we're consciously training ourselves to be able to get into that state.
So you want a high variability.
Yes, the higher the variability, the more healthy your nervous system is, essentially, because it can flick between that sympathetic and parasympathetic state.
Okay, so if it's high, like if your heart rate is high when you're stressed.
Heart rate variability. Yeah, so your heart rate increases when you're stressed.
And then it's low when you have kind of hacked your system and you've brought it down. So you would have a good heart rate variability if you were stressing yourself as well as controlling that amount of stress. Is that right?
Nailed. Yeah, spot on. And that's what we want to be able to do. At the end of the day, stress is about getting us out of a situation that should last only 30 seconds. However, now we think of like mortgage issues and we think of problems with our family or relationships, and that causes this 30-second kind of burst of stress in our mind, but continuously. So our ability to get out of that as soon as possible is ideal for health, well-being, and performance, because it just changes our state. And if you listen to anything,
can you also, I think I know the answer to this, but I would imagine you could increase your heart rate variability even if you were at a low level by bringing stress into your life, maybe in the form of exercise?
Yeah. So if you're using stress, like a kind of stressor as what we call hormetic stress, where you've got an adaptation to it, so high intensity interval training, weight training, cold showers, cold exposure, heat exposure, that sort of thing that people do, is it's okay, you're amping that up, but then you're immediately taking it away. So your body's adapting to it. So it's like overcoming. It's like you can train your nervous system to say, hey, look, I'm going to have a massive stress response, but then straight away I'm going to flow in some anti-inflammatory cells in there and bring that straight back down again.
I love this idea. And I've always thought of the ability to overcome adversity or fortitude or perseverance, whatever you may call it. I've always thought about it as a muscle, and I've never really had a scientific rationale for it. But this heart rate variability almost dovetails into it perfectly, because what you're saying is when you force yourself into stressful situations, you're actually increasing your heart rate variability, which has a physiological response that is positive to your health.
So I wouldn't use the word force, but I'd use the word choice in creating it as a goal. Because when we create things as a goal, if you think you've got in a predator prey situation, you've got a lion and a zebra, they both need the stress response to increase their heart rate, to get the energy into their body to run. One's getting a reward, the other one is not, obviously. So if we can actually turn our fears into goals, or our stresses into goals, and actually go, okay, I'm going to step into these, we all of a sudden change that within our perception. We get the release of dopamine, and that then actually changes the response physiologically, and it allows us to get out of that sympathetic stress state and back into a calm state, because we're making choice instead of being reactive to it.
Yeah. So how do we turn stress into goals?
I guess you've got to, in a way, again, it's just using those small little responses. So if you're an individual who never has a cold shower or is afraid of the cold, you might every now and then just gradually break these down into small achievable things. So not something that's so fearful that you can't do it and it causes like you to seize up. But if you say, hey, can I just turn the warm shower to a cold shower and stay in there for 10 seconds? Number one, yes, I've done it. I've achieved it. Okay, well, tomorrow can I do it 30 seconds? The day after that, can I do it with 3 seconds? 3 minutes, and just gradually build that up so that you're getting that. I guess the release of dopamine and the reward from it each time. So breaking your fears and your stresses down into individual ones that you can work towards is a great way to be able to change the frame of how they are, so that you can become adaptive to them.
No, that makes sense. You obviously are really well versed in the science of sleep, of health. So I'm curious, what do you do on a daily basis? Kind of what's your routine, or what are the non-negotiables that you are always doing to perform at your best level?
So I've actually just finished writing a short little book, and I have a webinar coming up. That's 7 simple and actionable habits that you can use to manage your energy. Ooh. And this is trying to help people tap into their own physiology to bring their alertness levels up in the morning, to avoid that mid-afternoon slump, and then to bring their arousal levels back down again at nighttime so they can get good sleep. So the first thing I always do is in the morning is make sure I get sun exposure to my eyes within 30 minutes of waking.
Get what to your eyes?
Exposure to the sun. So get
sun.
outside.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. So get out into the as the sun's rising, or when the sun's low in the sky, because that spectrum of light is basically going to ramp up the cortisol in our body. It's going to bring up our body temperature, and that's going to make us feel more alert. Mm. Okay. So then what I'll do is if I do that afterwards, I might have a cold shower again, just using that as an exposure to something that's just going to make me feel more alert, more focused. And I have a morning routine that involves essentially like a form of yoga, a very short, high intensity workout, and then some like a Wim Hof style hyperventilation breath work. But it really changes depending on my current state. So if I have a day where I've got loads of meetings and I'm continuously talking, then I might go and spend 10, 15 minutes doing some slow breathing in one of these protocols, and that can relax me again. So whereas if I woke up in the morning and I'm not feeling too great, I might do some kind of breath work or some kind of activity that's going to bring my levels of energy up.
Yeah. So what's the highest ROI in the morning for you? Because I know a lot of people are like, look, I'd love to get up and spend 2 hours getting ready for my day. And I get that, because it would be nice, right? But some people have kids, they're getting off to their job. Like what are they going to do? Wake up at 3 so they could spend time doing yoga, breathing, they're not going to get the sunlight at that point either. But let's just say they have an hour, because I think everyone can try to find an hour before, anyone else in the house might be up. You're going to have to wake up earlier for it, and you might be affecting your sleep a little bit. But what are the biggest ROI activities for the morning routine that you've seen?
So that would be getting out, just doing 5 to 10 minutes of high intensity interval training. Obviously have a little bit of a warm up first. So you get your body moving, get your heart rate up, do it outside so that you can get the sun in your eyes whilst you're doing that. Finish that off with some 5 to 10 minutes of just hyperventilation breath work, which is essentially just breathing at a high pace, making sure you're forcing the air in.
Okay.
Might do 30 breaths, you might do a little bit of a break, and you might do that 3 times. That's going to take you 10 minutes, and then you hit a cold shower. Once you've done that, it might take you 25, 30 minutes, you're ready to go. Your body's alert, you've released adrenaline, epinephrine, acetylcholine. You're ready to be focused and alert, ready to tackle your day.
Boom. Love that. What else? You said you had 7 things.
Yep. So, so the number one is how many people are actually measuring their hydration. Do people actually are aware of how much they're drinking? I think it's 10% of all GP issues related to fatigue are just down to hydration. People
That's
just not
crazy.
being aware. Yeah, people.
What is it? Is it 60 ounces or something like that? You're supposed to be drinking of water a day.
Yeah, and if you're in a hot climate, even more. If you're someone who works out a lot, even more. You can basically monitor by the color of your urine. If it's if it's quite light, then you're generally okay, as long as you're not drinking a lot of caffeine during the day. But most people get up in the morning straight away. They go for a coffee, then the first drink at lunch. In the mornings, coffee, and then they might work out in the evening, and they might sweat a lot, and all of a sudden they just go on this pattern of caffeine and not much water, and it becomes a bit of an issue related to dehydration. So that's one of them. Another one is, we've talked about this, is avoiding large carbohydrates at lunchtime. Have a high protein, high fat with some fiber with a small portion of carbohydrates. And then if you start to feel tired, then just hitting one of these non-sleep deep rest protocols for 10 minutes. And then in the evening is ensuring that you're avoiding bright lights at nighttime. And setting yourself an evening routine that might have a relaxation protocol within there of maybe just 5 minutes of exhalation focused breathing. So if we're going to talk about an evening routine, this is very beneficial, not only physiologically, but psychologically. If you put something on a pattern and do the same thing over and over again, you're basically anchoring that state into your mind, and you're putting it into your nervous system, to the point where one of the major things about insomnia is people getting worried and concerned they can't sleep, so they start thinking about their sleeping, and then they overthink, and then all of a sudden they can't sleep. But the best way to treat that in psychology is cognitive behavioral therapy, to change your way of thinking about your sleep. But what about if you don't have to think about your sleep at all, because you're consistent with your evening routine so much that your brain just knows the next step is turning the light off and going to bed?
Yeah. So there's a couple things that I want to ask you about that too, right? So I believe that we do things for our children that are intuitive and make a lot of sense, like an evening routine. We know that our children, and if anyone has kids, they might have observed this. If you have the same routine every single night, you may say, we are having dinner, we are taking a bath, we are reading a book, and then you're going to bed. That has now set the precedent for the nighttime routine for the duration of their childhood, right? And they understand their body is getting adapted to the idea that after food, bath, book, it's sleep time. So now it's a little bit more consistent. If you could do it at the same time every day, it's even better. Their body's just honed in on the idea that this is when we sleep. However, as adults, we don't prioritize that same routine in our life oftentimes. And I understand that things could come up and you might have two jobs, whatever it is. But if you can get yourself into a routine at night where your body understands this is the time we sleep, it seems intuitive that would make it much easier to fall asleep. Am I right about that?
100%. Yeah, it just, like I say, it puts that state into the mind, into the nervous system, to say, hey, the next step is just going to sleep. So as simple as maybe choosing 2 or 3 things that you can do consistently, and that might be giving yourself a time to wind down, whatever you choose that is to wind down, whether that's just sitting there with a bit of peaceful music on, whether you're putting doing some breathing, mindfulness, or whatever you choose that makes you feel relaxed. Doing that with another thing that can be associated with that. So I often use with my clients, I use scents, so like incense sticks or candles that have a certain smell.
Okay.
And if you use that consistently when it's a period where you're dimming down the lights, then we can almost use that scent in a way to anchor in a certain state, so that when we smell this, it sends a signal to our brain that we think, okay, well, actually, yeah, it's time to sleep. And you can take that away with you as well. So you can take that scent away to like hotel rooms and things like that. So then you can feel more homely, and you can kind of get that feeling of feeling calm again. And you might have those 2 things with brushing your teeth, the next step, and then going to bed. But doing it serially in the same routine, walking the same pattern and lighting the candle in the same place, taking the seat down in the same place, going to brush your teeth in the same place, turning the light switch at the same time, and then rolling into the bed. It's just literally that pattern of behavior that the brain goes, the next behavior is to switch off.
Yeah. What's your evening routine? What do you do?
So I actually suffered with insomnia maybe 4 or 5 years ago, when I had a massive bout of anxiety for about 6 months, and I struggled. So I really went into the depth of looking at what the ideal routine was to try and get someone to fall asleep. And mine was to turn the lights, dim the lights right down, to light an incense stick, to do some calming yin yoga. Well, I actually made a chamomile tea, and whilst that was cooling down, I did a 5-10 minutes of yin yoga. Then I actually did some calming breath work whilst that was, drank my tea, and then I just rolled into bed. And I did it right next to my bed, pretty much, so I could just get up and just roll into bed, and did it all in the dark. And I just had one candle on, blew the candle out, and went straight to sleep. So I'll use that when I'm I can come back to that now when I'm in a place where I can't sleep. But for the time being, it's pretty much just some kind of relaxation. Like after this, I will spend some time just doing some calming breathing, because I'm quite amped up just from having an awesome conversation with yourself. But I've moved to I'm actually in Bali, Indonesia now. I'm in Australia, so
okay.
I quit my job, and I fully work online, consult with people now, and I live out in the tropics, and my sleep is amazing because I wake up when the sun comes up, and I usually just start to settle down when the sun goes down.
That's amazing. The idea of the circadian rhythm is it makes so much sense. And going back to that vacation we took in Hawaii, it was the sun went down at 7, it came up around 6, and the nice thing was, because of the time change, I'm not someone on vacation that needs to go like out to the club or drinking or whatever it is. I'm just cool hanging out, watching the sunset, winding down, going to bed. I like to get up for the sunrise. So it was perfect because I was in bed at like 8 o'clock, on vacation, but I'm up at like 4:35, getting my routine going, watching the sun come up, and it felt so natural. And not having like any sort of work obligations or anything, it made so much sense, and it seemed like my body wanted that. Like it really seemed like it was the natural way to live, to go to bed with the sunset and to wake up with the sunrise.
You've hit the nail on the head there, because one of the best things you can do to actually look at your natural sleeping pattern, your natural sleeping rhythm, is to get out of the city. Just go and spend some time out in nature, whether that be camping. Try to avoid technology around the times where you'd usually be waking up and going to sleep. Just jot down what time it is that you naturally wake up in the morning and naturally go to bed. And what you'll find is your body, after about 5 or 6 days, will just go to its natural place, because of the sunrise and the sunset and the lack of exposure to stress and technology. And you can keep that within an hour at the beginning and an hour in the evening, and say, actually, this is where my body does prefer to feel awake and sleepy.
It makes so much sense. And you talk about work too. And one of the biggest issues with work is, as we're sitting here staring at a computer with each other, is that like there's so much talk now about blue light, right? Like your cell phone, your computer, this whole blue light spectrum. I don't know that I'm completely bought into it, but have you looked at the way blue light affects sleep, your eyes, your health in general?
Yeah, so I mean, there's all different spectrums of light, obviously. Now, the light itself can actually make us wake up, obviously it does, but also the sunset, the colors that we get with the oranges and the yellows from the sunset actually help and train the sleepiness state as well. So watching the sunset, actually, one of the things that I would say to people who have a bit of an issue with their sleep at nighttime that is related to a poor sleep schedule is just maybe try and watch the sunset if you have the opportunity to. I know in Western Australia, I lived on the west, so I did, and it was calm and relaxing. It was easy. But the blue light is the spectrum of light that does make us more alert. So getting that sort of light into your eyes late at night time is going to delay your rhythm of sleep maybe by an hour and a half, which can put you in a different kind of time zone, really. If you travel across from one side of America to the other side, there's a quite significant difference in there. So you could be midway in between just because of blue light exposure at night time. The literature on the actual blue light blocking glasses is very conflicting. There's some positives, and there's often people that saying it's just there isn't much difference. So really, it is just trying to avoid the exposure to any kind of light after a certain amount of time is going to be dangerous. Is going to be detrimental to sleep. But exposure to light between the hours of 11 p.m. and 3 a.m., which is typically when most people should be asleep, is really detrimental to our emotional health, as we talked about before. There's a part of our brain called the habenula, and it's basically the part of our brain that, when activated, is the part of the brain that makes you feel down and depressed. And that gets activated when you expose yourself to bright light for 10, 15 minutes between that time zone of 11 to 3. So people who get up in the middle of the night and jump onto their emails, jump onto their phone, or can't just lay there just because they can't sleep, and all of a sudden put light in their eyes, they're actually making themselves feel worse the next morning.
Jeez. So, people who are doing that are likely, they may be battling insomnia, but it's probably because their mind is racing and they feel like they haven't resolved issues that have maybe come up during the day. And I did want to get to the insomnia part, because I do feel like it's important to have strategies to kind of stop yourself from worrying throughout the night. So do you have any hacks or strategies? What are the top 3 things you could do to stave off insomnia when it comes to the actual worrying about things that need to get done?
I think the number one thing really is obviously, if many high performance individuals have a bit of a list of what they want to get done throughout the day, and if you can kind of say, right, if I'm happy with hitting 65-70% of this list every day, you can kind of bring that stress level down because you feel like you've achieved something already. So that's probably a prevention that most people can do if they are sensitive to insomnia. And then another one, which we don't really talk about too much, which is actually just leaving your mobile phone and your laptop out the room completely. Because if you've got some kind of technology in your bedroom, then what you're doing is you're not even on your own time schedule. You're on someone else in your phone books or your email list sleep schedule, because it might make a bleep in the middle of the night, or psychologically you might be thinking, I'm waiting for this email, I'm waiting for this message just to get confirmation on this contract, or to find out what I need to do in the morning. And even if you can consciously say to yourself, I'm not going to look at it, I'm not going to read it, unconsciously it's still there on the side of your bed. You haven't actually fully accepted the day's over and you have nothing more to do. So by leaving that technology or the phone outside the room, or putting it in a place where it's tucked away and you're not going to touch that again, it unconsciously tells yourself that actually I don't need to worry about anything for the rest of the day now, because I'm making this commitment that I'm going to get a solid night's sleep, and in the morning I believe in myself to be able to get everything I need to get done. The third thing is going back to this deep rest protocol, this NSDR protocol. If you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't get back to sleep, plug one of those in. It's just going to put you back into that sleep state, and the scientific literature says it's one of the best things we can do for people that wake up in the middle of the night or suffer with insomnia, other than talking to a psychologist and getting cognitive behavioural therapy.
Yeah, I was, I forget where I saw, I don't know if it was a conversation I had or I was listening to somebody, but they were saying one of the best things you could do before bed if you struggle falling asleep is just to have a conversation with yourself. And if there's something that's in your mind that you are worrying about, is to address it, right? And maybe write down something about it. So whether it's journaling or writing even down like a to-do list, like tomorrow I will do this, and tomorrow, I'm going to check this off my box, but also just what can we do to fix this problem right now? Whether it's a solution to something that happened at work, whether it's an issue that you might be having with somebody else, you can go through it and say, we're going to work on this for 5 to 10 minutes. We're going to think about this right now, work through the problem, and then say, okay, is there anything else, like a conversation with yourself? Is there anything else we can do right now to fix this problem? And if the answer is no, then you've kind of given yourself permission to say, we don't need to stress about this all night. We have a to-do list for tomorrow. We've resolved what we can at this point. We can relax and go to bed. And while it may not completely eliminate all the stress of it, it gives yourself permission not to kind of toil over it for the rest of the night. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree. Yeah, I think if you're able to resolve it to the point where you know that you don't have any control over it, then you should just be able to try and let that go. However, I guess one of the would call it a paradox. The issues with sleep is that when we're falling into that sleep state, we almost get the alpha waves in our brain, which is the creative part of our brain. Do you know when you fall into sleep and all of a sudden you get a spark of an idea? Yes. I think when I was building my my business up vision and stuff like that, there was points where I was just like, right, I need to fall asleep now, but I'm got so many creative things coming up in my mind that what I just did is just took yourself out of the bedroom and just get a pencil and pen and a paper and just start writing it all down, just so that you're not thinking about it all night. You can just go, okay, this is now down. It's out of my memory. I don't have to think about it anymore. Get as much as you can on a few pieces of paper and then go back into the bed. But the most important thing is leaving the bedroom, because then you're not associating the work and you're not associating the creativity with the bed. Because if you start doing that, all of a sudden it's going to happen every time you get into that bed. You're going to have the same feeling. It goes back to that routine. If you're consistently working, but you're working in your bed and writing it all on your notes on a piece of paper whilst you sat there in bed, you just, you're anchored in a poor habit.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. What are you most excited about in terms of kind of health, wellness, sleep, performance? What's kind of the new literature? What are you really excited about that's kind of on the horizon?
The most exciting thing for me at the moment is just the how much we're tapping into ancient wisdom around breath, and how they managed to learn things through just learning through their body and learning through their mind. And now the scientific literature is starting to look at it and starting to take notice of more Eastern traditional stuff and saying, there's science behind this. There's evidence here now. And I think the Western medicine is going to start opening up to more of these things. And also in the psychological realm of like PTSD and trauma, we're starting to look at things like holotropic breath work and long forms of hyperventilation breath work to release these kind of issues that cause a lot of people's mental health. So that's a space that I'm really digging into, and the space in general of the connection between the psychology and physiology is massively changing because of the likes of things like heart rate variability. And the ability to track
exciting.
that.
I'm super interested in that. So when you write your next book about Eastern breath work, we'll have to have you back on here. I do like to end on final 3 questions that I ask everybody. But before we get into those, Martin, this has been awesome. I mean, you know so much about this. If anyone's struggling with their sleep, if anyone is struggling with their performance, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so they can follow me on social media, so just Performance Through Health, or get onto performancethroughhealth.com, and they can get me through there and contact me through there. So pretty much anywhere Performance Through Health, they'll be able to find me.
Awesome. And those links will be in the show notes, and anyone will be able to just click over and find you. So final 3 questions. So Martin, what is the most impactful book that you've ever read?
What's Tony Robbins' first book again? The big, massive red one. I forgot what it's called. Tony Robbins' first book, there's a red one. I can't remember what the title of it is now, but when I read it, that was massively impactful for me in terms of the way that we're able to change our state. That was looking at physiology, how we can change our physiology to change our psychology. The word framing, anchoring, all those sort of things that were discussed here, I delved into those when I started looking at, it's called Awaken the Giant Within. That's what it's called. Awaken the Giant Within.
Yeah, and he's an interesting guy. I actually was really impacted by his book, Money Master the Game. That changed my outlook on finance forever. And it was an unbelievable book that showed me that you have to have your money work for you. And there's a strategy to investing that is not necessarily as risky as you might think, but will also produce returns. So he's pretty impactful dude. If you could have a drink with anyone, past or present, who would it be? What would you drink and why?
I think I'd have an in-depth conversation with Jordan Peterson. I'd probably have a whiskey with Jordan Peterson. He's got such a fascinating mind, and the conversation and the depth of conversation that I'll be able to have, because he's just so open with what he talks, and he's a genius to listen to. So to actually just have an hour or an hour and a half with just a relaxed drink with him to really delve into personal topics would be amazing.
I find him very intriguing. That's the first time I've gotten Jordan Peterson as an answer to that question. And I, as well, would really enjoy talking to him. And he's battled some demons too. And it'd be really interesting to find out like what's going through his mind, and kind of just pick his brain on why people are the way they are, but also how he's kind of worked on overcoming some of the struggles he's had. And that's Jordan Peterson. He's a pretty amazing guy. So the whole every breath counts mindset to me is, it's got so many meanings, but it's gratitude, it's performance, it's making every breath that you take matter, bringing awareness to it, and utilizing it to become the best version of yourself possible. So, what does it mean to you to make every breath count?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that's really, for me, it's having the vision of who you want to be in your mind's eye in terms of what you want to give to the world, how you want to contribute, and what you want to do in terms of service to others, and continually working towards that. I think every you're saying every breath counts. It's like every step counts. It's like that continuous movement forward to becoming the best version of who you can be is where you find meaning and purpose in life.
I love it. Martin McPhilimey, thank you so much, man. This has been awesome. Guys, go out, find him on Instagram, go to his website, contact him, optimize your sleep, optimize your performance, and make every breath